I'm sorry, what? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. We had a lot
I'd like to call the meeting to
last
order.
week.
If we could stand for the pledge, please.
To the flag
Of the United States of America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under
under
God.
God.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the October District 94 Committee of the Whole meeting. Mission statement, please.
Community High School strives to promote and provide growth experiences in learning, leadership, and living. I
Thank
brought
you,
my
Rich.
notes.
Pardon me?
I brought my notes.
You brought your notes, all right. Thank you, Rich. And board agreements.
Our board member expectations are that A, board members will assume positive intent. Board members will treat each other with respect and be open and honest with each other and with the superintendent. And that board members will speak professionally and keep discussions at board meetings relevant and focused.
Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Here.
Ms. DeRamus.
Present.
Ms. Munoz.
Here.
Mr. Nagel.
Present.
Mr. Sake.
Present.
Mr. Zuniga.
Here.
Okay, that brings us to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where any member of the public can address the Board of Education on any topic. Presentations are limited to no more than 5 minutes per person, with a total time limit of 30 minutes for public participation. Personal charges or complaints against individual employees, volunteers, or students of the district should not be initiated during public comment. Due to legislative restrictions on what boards can or cannot comment on, the board does not engage in a dialogue during public participation, but will listen to concerns and, where appropriate, direct the administration to follow up. And we'll start with the in-person public comment. Patty Weber.
Hi. I did not print this off. I took a photo of it, so excuse me for looking down at my phone, which is part of my point. But I just wanted to thank you for the safeguards that you've put in place so far, especially the Blue Point system and getting that done fairly quickly. I appreciate all of that. And I attended the meeting last night with Dr. Dwyer. Thank you for your time. A lot of us were talking about how to prevent the guns from entering the school, let alone being reactive to a gun being in the school. And, we talked about metal detectors and wands and, gun sniffing golden retrievers, which I think would be really nice, actually. So I understand where the school stands on that, that's not something you're looking to implement right away. But thank you for dialoguing with us last night anyhow. But a couple of the points I did want to make are as such, and I was doing a little research today, and I read a statistic. It was 80% of gun incidents from home, and they typically obtain their firearms from home. And what about offering the community? And of course, we need funding for this, but safes for their guns, and educating parents that if you do have guns at home, they need to be locked up. You got to prevent kids from having access to them. So that's just a thought I had. And the other thing, and this goes back to a comment I've made at previous school board meetings regarding cell phone use in the school and how each teacher is required to regulate that or not. And this particular statistic is from Safer Watch website. And it says that, I'm quoting here, "We have kids who are so isolated inside." Mike Klumpner, a police officer who specializes in active shooter training, says, "They don't learn these problem-solving skills. Isolation happens in many ways. They're glued to technology, or perhaps their parents and caregivers are the ones sucked into a screen. They don't learn coping and conflict resolution skills. So when they get angry, they lash out in violent ways." And I think we may have heard this before, but I just think that when kids are in school, they need to be fully engaged, not only from an academic perspective, but also with their peers and their teachers and everyone. And if they are glued to their phone during passing periods, they're not getting that interaction. So they may be sitting in a class, learning, but they're not getting that interaction outside the classroom, and then they go home and they're on a screen and their parents are on a screen. So I think that's another reason why the school should regulate cell phone use as opposed to just relying on the teacher and not allow the kids on their cell phones as much, maybe during lunch or something like that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Next up is Liz Garling.
Hi. Garling, I just want to introduce myself. I am a 1992 graduate of West Chicago High School. I have a sophomore in college who graduated from West Chicago. I have a sophomore, and then I'll have a freshman coming in next year. So I love West Chicago High School. This is a letter that I actually addressed to Dr. Dwyer over the weekend about security. And I said, I first want to say that I'm happy with what you, the staff at D94, and the students have done to ensure all the students have remained safe. I'm more than happy with your response and communication to past incidents. At this time, I do not want metal detectors or see-through bags in D94. My reasoning is this. Number one, you've stopped students from causing any harm already with the methods that you have already been using. Two, putting metal detectors and see-through book bags is not a substitute for vigilant human beings. I feel that putting these two things in place would actually make the school less safe. Students and staff would tend to feel secure and might not report what they would now because they think that the metal detectors and the book bags are catching things, and they don't need to report what they see because it's already had a chance to be checked otherwise. I would much rather have caring, vigilant human beings looking out for each other as we've seen in the past. I don't want humans relying on metal detectors and or see-through backpacks to look out for themselves and their peers. I believe these things will cause a false sense of security. And number three, I also want our school, West Chicago High School, to feel like a home, and I don't want it to feel like a prison. Having to walk through metal detectors is not breeding an atmosphere that I feel is a healthy one for our students. And I said to him, I think you know this, but I love this school and community it provides for my students. I have the utmost confidence in the leadership, staff, and students of West Chicago to continue to make this a great place to learn and thrive. Thanks, and keep up the good work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. At this point, is anybody else who is here in person, have anybody else filled out a comment card? If you could turn in the comment. Oh, we're going to go through the emails. It's just if there's anybody else in here that has filled out a comment card to speak in person. All right, hearing none, we will start going through the emails. So the first one is from Tally Holland relating to gun incident 1021 and safety measures. As a parent of a current freshman, I'm deeply concerned regarding the safety of my child, all students, and staff. This is not the first incident that has happened, and unfortunately the last one was not all that long ago. I have 2 more children to go through this district and will be hesitant if nothing changes. What is it going to take? What is being done to ensure the safety of our students? It is obvious that we need tighter security measures such as metal detectors to improve safety measures. This needs to be made a priority. While I appreciate the email notification on Wednesday the 21st regarding the event, why has there been no follow-up notifications from the school? It is a shame that I have gotten more detailed information from social media, from the state's attorney's office. Parents need to be informed. This has to change. This has to be a priority. Safety and lives, children. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I, and I'm sure others as well, are will to help to do what needs to be done to make this happen. Thank you for your time, Tally Holland. Okay, we have 2 more in-person public comments, so we'll rotate back to that. Next is Miria Lara.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Mireya Lara.
Good evening, my name is Mireya Lara.
Tengo 2 estudiantes en la high school.
I have 2 students in high school.
Desafortunadamente, el año pasado viví una experiencia muy fea.
Unfortunately, last year I lived a very bad experience.
He pedido mucha ayuda a la escuela
I have asked the school for help,
y nada que me escuchan.
and they haven't heard me.
He acudido al señor Pete Martino, nunca me quiso atender.
I have requested attention from Bill
Pete Martino.
Bill Martino, and he has not cared to answer me back.
El señor Godino tampoco me quiso atender.
Mr. Gordinos also has not been able to pay attention to me.
Sí. Desafortunadamente mi hijo no está entrando a clases, no estaba entrando a clases.
Unfortunately, my son was not coming into classes.
Todos los días estaba en la escuela pidiendo ayuda y nunca me ayudaban.
Every day I was here asking for help, and they never received help.
Nunca sabían por qué era la razón que mi hijo no estaba entrando a clases.
They never knew why my son was not attending classes.
Nunca sabían darme una respuesta
They never knew
de
how
lo
to
que
give
yo
me an
estaba
answer,
preguntando
neither
todos
an
los
answer
días.
of everything that I was asking every day.
Hasta que decidí entrar a la escuela
Until the one day that I decided to come into the school,
y mis sospechas que yo traía de drogas.
and my suspicions that I had about drugs.
Mi hijo traía una mochila de un compañero de él.
My son had a backpack from another student.
Le pedí al señor del Real que si la podía abrir y dijo que no podía.
I have asked Mr. Real if he could please open the backpack, and he said
Cuando
no,
yo
I
estaba
couldn't,
dando el permiso de que la abriera enfrente de mí.
even though I was given the permission to open that right in front of me.
Tuve que hacer yo su trabajo y personalmente yo abrí la mochila
I had to do his job, and I personally opened the backpack,
y encontré drogas en la mochila.
and what I found was drugs in his backpack.
¿Qué conseguí de eso? Que a mi hijo le dieran un ticket cuando yo tenía todo el año preguntando qué estaba pasando y cuando nunca me daban una respuesta.
What did I find out about that? Well, I actually got a ticket for my son got a ticket, even though, and that was for my help that day, even though I have been asking all through the school year for help to the school.
Desafortunadamente tuve que hacer yo el trabajo de las personas que trabajan en la high school
Unfortunately, I had to do the work of the people that work at the high school.
y vengo a exigir,
And I'm
no a
here
pedir, exigir
to really demand, I don't want to ask,
que
I want to
investiguen más sobre
demand,
las drogas que hay dentro de la high school.
to demand what is happening with drugs in the high school.
Porque Verónica ya varias veces me ha dicho
Veronica has told me many times
que aquí no es preschool para andar persiguiendo a los alumnos.
that this is definitely not preschool to be chasing after students.
Mi hijo reprobó el año.
My son
¿Es un
failed the
freshman
school
otra
year.
vez?
He is a freshman again.
Yo quise pagar las clases para que pasara el año.
I wanted to pay for the classes so he could go to the next school year.
Eran demasiadas, no pude cubrirlas todas ese mismo día.
There were too many, and I couldn't cover for
No
all of them.
quisieron darme facilidades de pago
But they wouldn't even accept for me to be able to accommodate
y mi hijo está
payments.
repitiendo el año nuevamente.
And my son is repeating the school year one more time.
Necesito
I need
que los estudiantes carguen mochilas transparentes,
that the students carry backpacks that are transparent.
que no se permitan las gorras,
I don't want them to allow for
las
hats
chamarras dentro de la escuela.
or coats inside the school.
¿Cuántas armas necesitan pasar más para hacer justicia o para
How many more arms
que los niños
or
estén
guns
bien?
do we need to go through here so that to realize
que
the
un niño
students need
parezca
to be
muerto,
okay?
por ejemplo?
Do we need a student that is dead?
¿O qué necesitamos más?
What do we need?
Todos los días, durante todo un año estuve en la escuela
Every
y
day
nunca me
during the
ayudaron.
school year, I was at school here asking for help, and I never received
Yo
it.
tenía que venir a exigir que me enseñaran las cámaras para ver dónde estaba mi hijo.
I came to demand that people will show me the cameras to find out where my son was.
Jamás recibí una llamada de avisarme que llegaba tarde, que no entraba a
I
clases.
never received a phone call to say that he was coming late or that he was not going into classes.
Y nomás decían, voy a checar.
And all I heard was,
Y jamás
I'm gonna
checaba
check,
nada.
but they never checked.
Estuve a punto de perder mi trabajo por venir a ver el trabajo de los que están en la
I
escuela.
was to the point of almost losing my job to be here to check what's happening in the school.
Pero siempre lo he dicho, no me importa perder mi trabajo porque están primero mis hijos.
But it's okay. I don't care losing my job because my kids are first.
Porque por eso los mandé a la escuela, para que se
That's what they're
educaran,
here.
no
'Cause
para
I
que se
want them
hicieran
to have
delincuentes.
education. I don't want them to become delinquents.
Para que se hagan delincuentes, yo misma los puedo enseñar.
If I want them to be delinquents, I
Y
can
no
teach them
necesito
that.
mandarlos a la escuela
And
que
I don't
aprendan
need-
a usar drogas.
I don't need to send them to school also to learn to use
Le echan la
drugs.
culpa al distrito 33, que ya vienen de allá, sí.
You
No
guys
lo
are-
sé.
You guys are always sending blame to school.
Estoy
¿Qué
hablando
distrito? ¿Qué
de 33.
District 33 because they're coming from there. I don't
Estoy
know
hablando
what they
por la
are.
que estoy viviendo aquí, no en el Distrito
But
33.
I'm here, I live here, so I'm speaking on behalf of this district.
Por favor,
Please,
necesito, no
I need-
necesito, exijo
I don't need,
Como
I
mamá.
demand as a mother
que chequen todo lo que está pasando en la high school.
that please check what's happening at school.
Porque ya he agotado todos los recursos y no sé a dónde más acudir.
I have extinguished all my resources and I don't know who else to
Ustedes
reach
me
out
imagino
to.
que son padres,
You are parents.
deben de tener alguna solución y no creo que
You
quieran eso
probably
para
have
sus
a
hijos.
solution. I'm sure you don't want the same things for your kids.
Soy mamá soltera y estoy luchando mucho para que mis hijos salgan adelante.
I'm a single mom and I am fighting a lot for my kids to have an education and move forward.
No para que vengan a usar drogas aquí a la escuela.
I don't want them to be here using drugs.
La BPAC también, la presidenta que eligió Verónica, sin votaciones,
The president for BPAC,
a mí jamás me invitaron a
I
votar.
never received an invitation so we could vote.
La nueva presidenta no ha hecho nada para las mamás que estamos necesitando la ayuda.
The new president has done nothing for all the moms.
¿Qué
that we
clase
need
de
help
presidenta
and
tenemos
and
entonces?
resources. So what kind of president do we have?
Es todo, muchas gracias.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And next we have Rocio Hernandez.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, good evening.
Muchos de ustedes ya me conocen
Many of you already know me.
y estoy aquí por eso precisamente,
And
por
I
lo
am
que acaba de decir Mireya.
And I am here exactly
siempre
for
se
what
los he
Mireya
dicho.
has said.
Siempre se los he
I have
dicho.
always
¿Qué están
told you that.
esperando?
What
¿Que
are you
el
waiting
tercero
for?
que venga con la pistola dispare?
Do you want the third person to come here
Ya
and
son dos
shoot?
pistolas.
There's been 2 guns already.
¿Están esperando que el tercero venga con una metralla y dispare?
Are you waiting for a machine gun to come?
¿Qué es lo
and
que están
start
haciendo con lo de
shooting?
la droga?
What are you doing about drugs?
Llevo 2 años
I
y
have-
con este casi
I
3
have been here 2
diciéndoles
years,
lo mismo y no
almost
hacen
3.
nada.
Telling you the same thing and you haven't done anything.
Nada, no están
Nothing.
haciendo nada.
You haven't done anything.
Aparte de todo esto, mi hija faltó por 5 ocasiones
My daughter
porque
missed
estaba
school
enferma
for 5 times because she was sick.
y mencionando como casualidad de la señora Verónica,
And she mentioning Mrs. Veronica.
pone un mensaje diciendo, hey, tu
She
hija ha
sent a
faltado
message
5
saying,
veces y
"Your daughter
necesitas
has-
reunirte con tu Soldier o no sé
Your
quién
daughter has missed school 5 times and you need to meet with
con tu consejero.
with her counselor.
Para que regrese por el buen camino. Hello, están
she can
buscando
return
niños
for the-
enfermos, deberían de estar buscando a los delincuentes que están con drogas aquí adentro.
To return, and she was basically saying that her daughter, Veronica sent a message saying, you need to come here because we would like to return your daughter in a good path. It's like, you know what, you shouldn't be looking for kids that are sick. You should be looking for those that are being delinquents.
Están buscando niños enfermos
You're
y no
looking for sick kids.
están ajusticiando niños enfermos
And you're just-
y no se ponen a justiciar al de
And
la
you're not
pistola,
just- and you're not
al de la
making
otra
justice to the
pistola
ones
y al
with
que trae el
guns,
cargamento de
the
droga. Y
ones
como
that
se los
brings
dije una
drugs.
vez y
And
se
like
los
I
voy a
told you
volver a
one
repetir,
time, and I'm gonna tell
si
you
no
again,
hacen nada por
if
la
you
droga
don't
es
do
porque
anything
aquí
for the
tienen
drugs,
el dealer.
It's because here you have the dealer.
Aquí lo tienen
You have
y
to have the
necesitamos
dealer here.
ayuda.
And we need help.
Aparte de todo esto, en el Consejo de
Besides this,
BPAC supuestamente es a voto popular y
BPAC
Verónica implantó a una
is-
mujer que está intentando traer un grupo de afuera.
BPAC is also by vote, and apparently Veronica just sent a notification that we had a president.
Trajo a una mujer, más bien nombró a una mujer como
She named
presidenta
a
que pertenece a un
person who was a
grupo
president somewhere
populista afuera
Oh, that
y
she's
que
a
lo
popu-
quiere introducir
a part
aquí.
of a group that is a popular group that she wants to introduce here.
Supuestamente aquí estamos buscando el bienestar de nuestros
Supposedly
hijos.
we want the well-being of our kids.
Estamos buscando eso, no
That's
estamos
what we're
buscando un
looking for.
estúpido,
But we seems to be looking for stupid. We're not looking for
estúpido
someone stupid.
ballet folclórico y mariachi. Estamos buscando que erradiquen la droga.
We don't want a ballet folklórico. We want, seems like we're
Y
we're
como
looking
se
for
los
is
dije
someone
una
for
vez,
drugs.
si tienen hijos, porque la
you
mayoría de
have
ustedes
kids
tienen
here,
hijos,
because I
así
assume
como
you do
cuidan a
too.
los suyos, deberían de cuidar a los
Just
de
like you
aquí.
take care of your own kids, please take care of ours.
Y hay muchas cosas más.
And there are many, many more things.
Y entre todas esas anomalías también, a Verónica
And
dice,
through all of
soy,
them,
soy
Verónica
la
tells us,
directora de no sé quién y la
I
directora
am
de no
the
sé qué.
director of so
Una
and
sola
so, the
persona para
director of
hacer
so and
tantos
so.
cargos y no hace nada.
There she appears to have so many hats, and yet she doesn't do anything.
Somos adultos y necesitan clarificar
adults
todo
and
eso.
we need to
Ustedes,
have
ustedes como
clarification.
directivos de la
You,
escuela,
as a board of directors, need to clarify things.
necesitan hacer todo eso y
You need to do
clarificar
that
todo eso.
and clarify it.
Eso es todo.
That's it.
Thank you for your comments. All right, now we return to some electronic submissions. This is from Frank and Janelle Zaberna, the topic of school safety. Good evening, school board members and administration. We are very concerned parents at West Chicago Community High School and think safety should be of the utmost importance. We are asking for changes to be made. We have heard from board members and school admin regarding the safety measures that are in place. However, many, if not all of these measures seem to be reactive measures as opposed to proactive measures. We are asking for you to rethink your methods to ensure that weapons do not get into the school in the first place. Please up security at the doors. Make sure your security staff are doing what they need to do. We have heard of multiple security breach stories from the students as the hired security company does not seem to be doing much. Time to get tough. Things need to change before an incident happens. Thank you, Frank and Janelle Zaberna. Next is from Roxanne Rose. Topic, school security. To the West Chicago Board of Directors Administration, I have been watching the board meetings since the spring of last year and have seen the updates and discussions in regards to school safety as well as gun safety. I have 2 kids that attend the school currently and are active in many activities. I appreciate the efforts of the board and the school to keep our kids safe, but still feel more needs to be done. Unfortunately, I am unable to attend this meeting in person, but I wanted to share a few incidences with security issues that I experienced personally. Number 1. At the beginning of the school year, I had to drive one of my teens to school early. I noticed that at door B, the door was propped open with a stanchion. There was no administrator or security guard standing outside the school to check who was entering. After my teen had entered the school, I texted to ask if there was a security guard there inside, and she said yes, but she was not required to scan in anywhere for access. I stayed at the door for several minutes to see if anyone was coming out to check why the door was propped open. Nobody did. Number 2, last week I had a meeting with a school counselor. I was able to walk into door H while 3 students were walking out. If there were any other students going out or holding doors, anyone could walk right in. When I was buzzed into the office, I just said I had a meeting with ex-counselor and was never asked to sign in or use the Raptor system, or even what my name was. Number 3, over the weekend I volunteered at a fundraising event held in the Bishop Gym, open to the public and hosted by a WeGo team. The visitor bleachers were packed. The gym was filled with both kids and adults. There was not one security guard or officer at the main doors where people paid to enter or anywhere that I was sitting. I manned the entry doors for 2 hours and sat inside the gym for 1 hour. I realize this is happening on a weekend, but it was still an event hosted by the high school and should have had some sort of security measures as our kids were present. And to speak to the issue of guns on premises, I know this is very hard to police, but I urge the current board and administration to talk to other schools and gun prevention groups to see what measures they are taking to help prevent kids from bringing weapons into school. There are 3 times we know about where this has happened since last spring, but what about the times that we don't know about? I applaud the students that spoke up to make adults aware of what they knew or saw. And I think we as adults need to think more about prevention and not just how to handle something when it occurs, as well as after the fact. Please reach out and let the parents know how they can step up and aid you in this area. We all want the same goal, a safe and productive learning environment for our kids. Thank you for your time. Next is from Melissa Pylon regarding no metal detectors in school. As a parent of 2 students currently enrolled in WeGo, I'm concerned about the guns that have been brought into the schools. With that being said, I have read some of the comments on social media about metal detectors in our school. I have reservations about such a request. Metal detectors in school do not in turn make the school safer. It does, however, create social anxiety and can be detrimental to a student's mental health. The use of metal detectors can make the students feel more policed and less likely to feel as though they are in a safe learning environment. There may be a feeling of being in a prison and the teachers are now correctional officers. Although a metal detector could deter an unplanned attack, it is far less likely to prevent a planned attack. Determined shooters will find a way to get a weapon into school and will likely plan it out first. Currently, metal detectors are most commonly used in schools with a larger minority population. However, mass school shootings have been in schools with a higher demographic of white students. There is no evidence that proves that metal detectors have prevented weapons from getting into a school. In order to keep the lines of communication open between the students and teachers, I would prefer not to see more policing in school. I would like to see continued open communication between all parties, and the comfort to know issues will be addressed. Next up is from Crystal Noland-Riani regarding security. My name is Crystal Noland-Riani. I am a parent of students at D94 and D33. I'm coming to you as a concerned parent and ask that more be done proactively with security of our school. Last school year, both of our local school districts had issues with weapons being brought into their schools. This year has shown no change as weapons are still coming through our doors. I am happy to hear that D94 will be installing the Blue Point system soon and has already installed Raptor. We truly do need an active connection and protocols in place for such events. We also do hope that the new DEN program helps and can connect with as many students that need help as possible. However, we feel and have seen that this is not stopping the weapons being brought into our schools currently. The two recent times in D94 that we have heard of such incidents is because we have had brave students come forward and report them. We would be naive to think that these are isolated instances. Last night we learned that our security is only eyes and ears, in that they document whatever they see and hear that may be wrong, then someone reviews the cameras and then they proceed from there. No action is taken at the time. This seems very disconnected from what the role truly is, to help our students not observe and deal with later. We are also very disheartened to hear that our SRO of 2,100 students in a primarily Hispanic community doesn't speak Spanish. How are they the eyes and ears if they can't understand the language of the majority? We also are hearing from faculty, students, and have observed that security does not really happen internally. We as parents are able to get into our schools without being stopped or checked. We just learned yesterday a student had been using a gym ID to get into school for a month, and security never picked up on this. How will current security measures and future ones help if accountability is a moot point? We are also hoping that some discussions be had in regards to student bathroom routines. Last year, the issue with the bathroom took the boys down to 3 open washrooms and then to 1 for both boys and girls at the end of the year. I ask that you talk with other local districts about their sign-in and sign-out system they have implemented. This is used for bathroom breaks and any other leave of class our students may have. Students must scan their ID and then choose where they're going. Upon re-entry, they must do the same and report that they are back in class. This way, if there is an issue within the bathrooms, they know who is in that area at the time. This system has just started this year, and they have already found it to have decreased bad behavior in the bathrooms. Going back to generalized security, we started in our meeting with the principal last night. 3 of the parents in attendance came from the first fully cameraed high school in Illinois. They also started to implement wand detectors the year before Columbine and now have full walkthrough detectors. We ask that measures like this be brought to our district because we were the guinea pig for this back some 20-plus years ago, and we know that it worked for us. We were not terrified anymore when we walked through the halls, and I want that for our children. All of these deterrents put in place are time-consuming and costly, and we understand that. We ask that you look more into implementing the random security checks at random entry points on random days with wand detectors. This method will be more time and cost efficient than a full walkthrough and can show, if implemented, what effect it will have. Again, accountability always plays a part in this. We can never settle for complacency or being non-vigilant with our children's safety. In both districts, the common theme is everything starts in the home and being attentive with our children. But like both parent groups have told you, we are not the crowd you are targeting. How do you plan on targeting these children who do not get this attentiveness, who do not get the hard questions asked? How do you plan to get those parents engaged? The DEN program is a first step, but we need true safety measures in place so that these situations don't happen again. We will be contacting our high school directly and ask for a rundown on their rollout and the hard questions that get wrapped into this. That way, as parents, we can get a perspective on this as well. Thank you for your time and consideration. on this good day. And finally, from Christy Langelier, safety of everyone in the high school. Dear administrators and school board members, I'm writing to share my concerns regarding the safety of our children as well as the teachers and staff. My younger son, Andrew, is currently a junior at the high school, and I am a special education teacher in District 33. In light of the 3 recent instances of a gun being brought into the school, I continue to be extremely concerned about the safety of everyone at the school. When I listened to the recording of a school board meeting from June of this year, I was quite impressed with the many safety and security features that have been put in place. However, as we all know, these measures haven't been enough to keep guns from being brought into the school. Kids who are determined to bring a weapon to school or cause other sorts of trouble will find a way to do it. At all levels of schooling, there are students who are at risk of social, emotional behavior problems and others that are actively dealing with these sorts of problems. Rather than asking for metal detectors, which are impractical for many reasons, I am wondering what the high school already has in place to identify at-risk students and what measures are in place / could be implemented in the future to provide more supports for these students and their families, both in and out of the school. In my role at Turner School, I'm familiar with a tool from Illuminate Education FastBridge called SABRES. The SABRES Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavior Risk Screener is a brief norm reference tool for screening all students to identify those who are at risk for social, emotional behavior (SEB) problems. Teachers need only 1 to 3 minutes to rate each student. Students also complete a survey at least 3 times a year. This allows our student support team members to target specific students and their needs in small groups or individual sessions. I am asking that the high school continue to find ways to identify and support at-risk students and their families. Speaking both as a parent and a teacher, it just seems to make sense to get to the heart of the concerns, the kids who need help. Thank you, Christy Langelier. And that concludes the public comment that has been submitted. I would just like to say thank you all for your comments tonight. We have heard you and we share your fears and your concerns. The highest calling for a school is to be a safe place for children to learn. We have, we are, and we will continue to do our best to ensure that our school is a safe place for our students and staff. We do need to recognize, however, that everyone is involved in this complex issue. The students themselves, parents, families, community members, places of worship, first responders, as well as schools are all involved. And we must all do everything that we can to make our schools and our communities safe from violence. Again, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight. And moving on, that brings us to reports and information, school security.
And I too want to thank you for all the comments that were shared tonight and via email. This is a serious issue that the school is considering. Since the incident occurred, Dr. Dwyer and the building administration have been processing through that situation and reviewing current security measures as well as the support systems that we have in place for our students. We thought it would be a good idea to share those again with our board to articulate what is currently in place as well as what's scheduled to take place, and then have a dialogue also about some pertinent information relative to some of the questions that have come up. So with that, I am going to turn that over to Dr. Dwyer.
Thank you so much, and also thanks to everybody here tonight. It's definitely a challenging but incredibly important topic that is front of mind, not just for this community, but I would say most school communities in this country right now. As Dr. Ching said, I do want to take a little bit to review the things currently in place, the things coming online, how those things work together, and then certainly engage in some dialogue about some of the questions that have come up. So I want to just review currently what we do is, one, in the past little bit over a year, we've increased our Andy Frayne security presence from 5 to 15 security guards throughout the day. We continue to have a full-time school resource officer present here at school. Our Raptor system for visitors checking into our building have their ID scanned to ensure that they're safe to be here, safe to be on a school campus, and then are buzzed in through one of our main entrances. So we have that hold in place model, doors B and H, where you come in, you have to wait, and and then you get buzzed in once you've cleared that part of it. We've also added the Safe to Help Illinois system last school year. Again, that's a system by which community members, student staff, whoever it might be, can anonymously report things that they may see. One of our biggest assets also in the school that we've talked about extensively and that we use all day, every day is our surveillance camera system. We have an incredibly robust, high-definition camera system that we use both during the day, both in arrears. I mean, if something happened, we find out about it after the fact, then we'll go back and utilize. That's used by our dean's office, school resource officers, as well as by members of our security personnel too. In the morning, we also use just 2 doors for entrance, doors B and H. And again, where we have security guards as well as administrators, again, making sure we recognize kids, looking at IDs, and making sure that those who are here need to be here. We also, throughout the day, and this is in thanks to our increased anti-fraud security presence, we do door checks on the dozens of door entrances that you have when you have a 500,000 square foot campus. We're always moving around, checking those doors, making sure they're secure, and there are cameras on all of those doors as well, too. We also make sure that there are call buttons in all of our classrooms as well, too. So if an issue were to occur, call buttons can be employed. The call goes to multiple locations, and the proper personnel can then be sent if there is an issue. I want to also talk about some of the preventative things that we have in place, too. Those are what I would call security measures, what I just talked about. From a proactive standpoint, we have, even prior to last school year, this board, this school, the staff, the administration, we've really focused on social emotional well-being, knowing that any act of violence has a root cause to it. And we've really focused time, effort, and energy on making sure that we are the kind of school that can recognize those root causes and lend support before someone feels the desperation that can lead to violence. We've done that through increased social work and counseling. Since I've been here, we have added 3 social workers and 2 counselors to our school, and they've been able to make sure that the trusted adults have more time and can work more in depth with each individual student. Additionally, and again, kudos to the board for this, the addition of den time has been tremendous. Not only is it directly focused on that social emotional well-being of every student, and it's structured and it's designed so that we all have that tier 1 approach to that well-being. It also gives us a structure and a platform for when we do have events like this that we can include educational components and we can talk to the students in a structured way about these topics, which we'll be doing in the coming weeks with our student body. I also want to talk about the things that we have upcoming. The most important of those right now, and I appreciate the comments about Blue Point, which I'm excited about as well, but I'm probably the most excited about the Navigate 360 partnership that we have engaged in this school year, because that really is a 3-pronged approach that we're able to do. The first, again, is on that reactive portion of it. They have given us an enhanced ALICE training for all of the adults in our building. So if there is an event, everyone's getting that more enhanced training, and we're able to make better decisions and go through more hypotheticals about how we would respond in an emergency. But I'm probably the most excited about the proactive portion. I think this was brought up in one of the public comments. We have partnered with them on our threat assessment protocols, and we are using not the model referred to in that comment, the SABRE model, but rather the CSTAG model, which is the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines. The entire administrative team and the entire student services team are being trained. It's a 6 to 8 hour online training, as well as a full day in-person training that we are all in process of now. Previously, we've used the similar model. It's all derived from the Columbia model, in which we've done before through our student services department. We are expanding the people who understand that, who know what its purpose is, how to utilize it, how to implement it, so that when we do see signs of distress in a student, we can implement a threat assessment and head those problems off and get that student who might be in despair, get them the kind of support that they need. And again, I'm also really excited with the Navigate 360 on the security audit that by happenstance is happening this week. We'll have outside security experts in the building tomorrow, Thursday, as well as Wednesday evening into Thursday morning to do an incredibly comprehensive security assessment of all of our practices. And that doesn't just mean the locks, the security systems, but that really holistic, comprehensive view of school safety that I think we've been talking about in some really complicated but true ways for the past several months. So I'm really excited about those. I again really do want to commend the board, though, for your support of the recommendations that we've brought forward, especially in the last 6 months, because I think we've brought forward really thoughtful changes. And we've not just brought forward changes, but we've brought forward tools. So I started in education 20 years ago, and I was a high school senior when Columbine happened. And I can tell you that sadly, the most evolving aspect of school leadership in the 20 years that I've been a professional has been school safety. And it has gone from an afterthought and open campuses and these free-flowing environments to incredibly robust and much more complicated. And the willingness of the board to allow us to partner with outside agencies that are security experts, that are able to give us that perspective, that lens, so that we can not just make reactionary changes, but rather have an evolving toolbox. Because the threats, as we all see in the news, in other communities, as well as in our community, the threats continue to evolve in really quick ways, in ways that we're not always going to be ahead of. But when we have a playbook and we have tools that we can rely on that allow us to evolve our practices and to not just look at how are we going to react, but rather how can we be preventative and proactive, I think that's a really positive way for us to look at it. So I'm really appreciative of that. Going forward, it's my goal to make sure that, especially in the area of school safety, we're leading in a way that it's effective and it's growing our safety on a constant basis, and we're not making knee-jerk decisions, and we're not just stacking one thing on top of another, because I'm also going to be really vigilant that we don't do things that not only have diminishing returns, but can begin to have negative returns, meaning, and I think this was brought in one of the public comments, create a sense of complacency or a false sense of security, or things that begin to interfere with one another. If you add a system that is always sending alerts to people's phones to the point that we go deaf to it or we start to ignore them, that's not going to be safe either. And we visited some schools this summer as we looked at different things, and they shared stories of things that have happened that way. So I just want to end the talking portion for me with, again, I thank you for the support as we continue to evolve in this really complex, rapidly moving environment of school safety, knowing that everybody here on the board, here in the audience tonight, on the administrative team, the staff, we all have the same goal. We want to be as vigilant as we can to promote as much school safety as possible, and we're going to keep doing that. So I do want to open up to dialogue, definitely address questions and or comments that the board may have.
Just a couple things that were going into this audit is wonderful, and out of the public comments, there were a couple things that jumped out at me that I hope the audit will take a look at. Very concerned about the potential for doors being propped open and the concept of tailgating, people slipping in when somebody else is going out. I would hope the audit is going to take a look at that. The question of weekend event security, and also the question of whether there is an issue with our SRO officer not speaking Spanish. So those are some things that did jump out that I would hope will be brought up with the auditors to see what their feedback is.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first two topics, definitely Mr. Brown looking at the doors if there is an issue where someone propped the door, and I'll be reaching out to those public comments to get some dates and see if we can take a look at those. Weekend event security is something it's a very complex conversation. So we are, as we all know, we are the biggest building in West Chicago. School is one of the largest things this community does collaboratively together. And I will say, and I'm sure it's happening right now too, we are used all day, every night. We are a massive asset to this community. So our pool is used constantly by renting groups, our gyms, our field house. Upstairs right now, there are citizens of this community taking classes to get their high school equivalency and their citizenship. And that happens 4 days a week. So being able to do things like that, but also then looking at those security measures, it's a complicated conversation, one we're going to have to be willing to engage in and look at. There is no perfect solution. There's going to be give and take on all of those. The one thing I do want to say about the SRO piece, our SRO does not speak Spanish. I will say this, though. Our SRO has been in this school for over a decade and has wonderful relationships with kids, faculty, the community. He has been impeccable in every crisis moment that I've ever needed him. And he is surrounded in an office suite by no fewer than 6 people who speak Spanish and will, at the drop of a hat, be with him and translate and work with him in that moment. I've never seen it in my 4 years here once in Pete Officer's Lovato to be an incredibly productive and effective school resource officer. So I do definitely want to make sure that's on the record.
One thing I want to bring up that popped out at me is the Andy Frayne team that we have. One thing that I'd like us to consider as a board to kind of process through is the fact that, you know, some of these staff members, I mean, I don't exactly know the length of time that they've been employed or what the relationships are, but I remember there was a point at D94 when we did have people that were a little bit kind of higher stakeholders in monitoring the halls, monitoring after school events, that were present at almost, if not every single after school function, pretty close there too. And then we're also visible on the weekends when we did host outside events in the building. I don't necessarily know, because I'd be giving away my age at this point, but I don't necessarily know when that went away. But I know at one point there was. And I think that there's an accountability piece that goes in with that, because a lot, from what I understand, a lot of the Andy Frayne, staff members might not necessarily have those relationships built, might not necessarily know the kids. So I think that that's something that, we do want to consider, because, whether they're people that are here, whether they're here that they work for a while or that are kind of transitioning, I don't necessarily know. I think that we might need to look at that a little bit more, because I do feel that when you build those relationships, when you know those faces, I think that it only adds to the ability to problem solve crisis with individual students and overall builds the culture and climate in the building.
Yeah, it's good, and I'm glad you bring up the Andy Frayne part. And so some of, I think, what you're speaking to definitely precedes my time here, so we can definitely off record figure out what year you were talking about. But I do want to really talk pretty specifically about the Andy Frayne system we've got built. So there were, when I first came here in 2019, there definitely were members of Andy Frayne who have been here a long time. We saw a lot of retirement during COVID. A lot of those folks said, you know what, I've been doing this a long time. This feels like a good off-ramp, or we're going to go elsewhere. We've got a new contingent of folks who have been with us for a while, for about 1.5 years, 2 years. I will say, due to the nature of it, it is hourly employment, and there is some rotation in some of those folks. But I will say the purpose of them is definitely very specific, in that I do want them to know who the kids are. I want them to be familiar, recognize faces, move that way. And there are a litany of other schools who had issues with their security personnel having some inappropriate relationships. I can definitely supply you some of that. I do want them to maintain a certain distance and a certain amount of detachment from it, because they are eyes and ears. And one thing I want to characterize, oftentimes if you see an Andy Frayne security personnel, there may be an incident, or a student may say something and they won't confront them, because we do not want them to create confrontations. As a school, we are all safer the fewer confrontations that we create. And what we do want them to do is take note of that, and we will go back and check a camera, figure out who the kid is, and then we'll have the trained personnel, student services, a dean, whoever it might be, intervene at that time. Or all Andy Frayne carry the radio. If it is a more urgent situation, I want them on the radio, and they are constantly getting the right personnel to that moment to make sure that we have trained the adults in the building who that is what they went to college for, it's what they went to grad school for, it's what they're trained to do. So being those eyes and ears is a really important part of it. So there are a lot of aspects of our Andy Frayne partnership I think we can look at, but I know that on the surface there are aspects that may seem unsatisfactory, not as they should be, but in reality, in a school environment that is not a prison state, that is about learning, they are very much doing what we ask them to do in a way that is effective. I have been a student and a teacher in a school where security was very aggressive, and it did not create a conducive learning environment. It was a police state. I went to a high school of 1,200 kids that we always had 5 armed off-duty police officers at all times in that building, and it was a police state. I did not enjoy it. And I don't want to create that environment here. So I want to be very mindful of it too, how we ask them to engage or not engage with our kids.
Could we at some point get a little bit more clarity on like what the process is though? Like what is there, I mean, because I know at one point I had heard that there were concerns with like students walking the halls and not always their passes being checked. So we just want to ensure that everybody is following the same process and the same protocol to ensure student safety.
Well, the process and the protocol is always going to vary by the situation. So if a student's not responsive, as opposed to confrontational or aggressive, that's going to be different. A lunch period might look different than during second hour, but they're going to use their radios, and if it's a problem they can't solve, they're going to get our deans, they're going to get our a director or an administrator who's going to be able to deal with that situation. That is their process.
And Penny, I would add to the fact too, with the anti-frame, both Officer Lovato and the Dean's office do review periodically with the frames and meet with them to talk through the expectations and problem solve and improve the services. In the past, when we have had members of anti-frame not meet those expectations, they were not brought back, and we requested that. And then they were able to rotate other people through. To the point that Dr. Dwyer made earlier, there were a number of anti-frame that did retire, so they were struggling with their own staffing issues as well. But there is somewhat of an assessment that goes on to the quality of frame and what's going on with the services that they provide.
So are they evaluated yearly or?
We're just assessing. It's not a formal evaluation process because they are employees of anti-frame, but we review the services that they provide regularly, or I should say the Dean's office and the SRO, Officer Lovato, reviews that process with them.
And what I can tell you is, because this happens, if myself, any member of the administrative team, if we have a concern or a problem with a member of the anti-frame staff, they are gone the next day.
Thank you.
Can I ask what we're doing about the bathroom situation? Because that's been brought up a couple of times, and just where we're at with that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And I'll tell you, our bathroom situation actually is much improved. So we have utilized our anti-frame a little differently this time in that we are very aggressively putting them in bathrooms, rotating them across bathrooms. Currently, we're only locking bathrooms in the morning before first period begins. And we're leaving the smaller bathrooms open with a few select larger bathrooms. Because it makes it easier for us to monitor. So in the morning before school starts, when there's all 2,000 kids here, trying to keep track of all that we would need infinitely more adult bodies in the building. First hour begins, bathrooms are unlocked, and they're able to make a rotation around there. Our vandalisms, our instances of catching kids in vaping or reports of it have gone down very significantly. We've been pretty happy with that. Is it perfect? It is not perfect. We are not everywhere at all times, but it is much improved.
So all the bathrooms are open after first hour?
Unless there is an issue in the bathroom or a repair or anything like that, the bathrooms will be open after first hour.
Oh, okay, all right.
And anti-frame goes through and they do that, and there's a system which they radio it in, and it's checked off, opened, opened, opened.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When will we be receiving the report from the security audit?
I don't know. They come in tomorrow, and that's going to be a question we can ask them. I'm sure some of that will have to do with what they find or don't find.
Is this kind of were people prepped before this, or like, I know how it is in healthcare, we know when somebody's coming in sometimes to check on things. So will this be kind of a surprise audit for a lot of the people, or is everybody aware and on their toes type of a thing?
You know, there's been no formal announcement. We've made no email announcement or anything specific to staff. My guess is the majority of our staff would not be aware that this audit's going to happen. Okay. I've talked about it publicly here last night in other formats. There's nothing to hide. But certainly I hope we get as honest an outside perspective as we can.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Just for a quick overview, I shared with the board the 8-page document that had kind of an outline of what the audit entailed, which is both an external and an internal audit. But just for the sake of everyone's awareness, I'm just going to read through some of the points. They are going to obviously review the organizational structure, conduct interviews and walkthroughs with key personnel in the building, review through standard operating procedures as well as emergency operation procedures, review safety and security documents, conduct compliance review of programs and maintenance and other aspects. They will examine safety, security, and infrastructure standards based upon standards from ASIS, which is the American Society for Industrial Security, as well as standards from FEMA and standards from NIMS and the Department of Homeland Security, as well as state-specific requirements. They do also broaden their scope of the assessment to include technology, human assessment specifically for active shooter and active incident situations, natural disasters. They cover building interiors, which has to do with access, building access, surveillance, law enforcement, security, as well as building exteriors. So there's a whole plethora of things that they will cover. Their external audit is a number. How many times are they coming out for that one? Do you remember?
The building?
The external part, yeah.
I don't know. It might be 2. I'd have to check with that.
So it's not like a one shot and they're done. It's going to take a process, but it seems pretty comprehensive. So there is a summary report that they will provide. So once we get that, we will definitely be happy to provide an overview of what that report says.
Any other questions for the board regarding security? All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation and very much looking forward to getting Blue Point up and running and finding out what this audit reports and what else we might want to be looking at. And that moves us on to 2022 tax levy timetable overview.
Thank you. At the October 18th board meeting, I plan to present the 2022 tax levy. My presentation will be similar to the past presentations, other than it will include some information regarding the truth in taxation hearing. We are required to have a truth in taxation hearing when our tax levy extension increases by more than 5% from the prior year. The tax levy increase is based on the prior year CPI and new construction. Since the prior year CPI was 7%, but because of the property tax extension limitation law, will be limited to 5% plus any new construction that we have. I am still expecting some new construction, so with that, the levy request would be greater than 5%, so a truth in taxation hearing will be required. We still have multiple building projects outstanding, as noted in our recent facility plan, as well as increased student needs to consider, which is the reason for the levy request. I've requested information regarding new construction and EAV increases from our 2 local assessors, Winfield and Wayne Township. I should have that information by the end of October. Again, all of this will be included in the presentation at the October 18th board meeting. Then we'll have the November committee of the whole, where we'll have the opportunity to review and discuss if necessary. November 2nd, I would have to have that posted in the newspaper regarding the truth in taxation public hearing. And then November 15th, we'll have that board meeting with the truth in taxation public hearing, and then the adoption approval of that tax levy. Any questions?
Any questions or comments regarding the tax levy? Hearing none, that brings us to bus transportation update.
As we all know, we're in the midst of a driver shortage across the country. We have been lucky in the last couple of years that this has not affected our regular routes too much during the day. With that, Illinois Central has been struggling this year due to their shortage of drivers. Our morning routes are picking up students a little earlier than the posted pickup and dropping off at the school by 7:15, 7:20 in the morning, which leads to some students missing buses in the morning. In the afternoon, we rarely have more than 1 bus in the bus lane before 3 p.m., with the latest bus coming around 3:20. Needless to say, this causes issues with students getting home timely and students in the bus lane during dismissal, which definitely is a safety hazard. Additionally, just like last year, Illinois Central was not able to pick up for our athletic routes until 4:15 or so each day. The late start Mondays have also been an issue with buses dropping off its students after school starts on these days. This last Monday, we had 3 buses arrive after the start of school. At the start of school, Illinois Central was able to handle our routes without much of an issue. Once District 33 started, who we pair a lot of our routes with, They started after Labor Day, and then D33 also changing some of their bell times. Illinois Central is struggling even more to fulfill their routes. D33 has noted this similar issues with late buses and issues. We've met with Illinois Central to discuss their plan to improve services. We'll continue to have those meetings until they're able to perform that contract. We have a meeting with them set up for tomorrow. We've told Illinois Central that we're tracking the late buses and we'll be assessing the penalties as per the contract. We'll continue to work closely with Illinois Central until they can actually improve those services. With regards to Sunrise, that's our special education routes. They are able to provide more routes than they were able to last year, and initially were able to cover all the requested routes. They're now starting to struggle a little bit with some of the needed aids on the buses for those students, and having trouble with some of the consistency with drivers and pickup times. So we've had to go outside of Sunrise as well to find other options to make sure those students get to school on time. If you recall, the Sunrise's new contract called for a 13% increase if they were able to complete 98% to 100% of the routes requested. We are monitoring this rate increase in the overall routes requested to ensure billing is appropriate going forward. Any questions with that?
Thank you for the update. I know that bus industry is complex these days, and you certainly ran through a lot of concerning issues. The one that really jumped out at me as being a big one is if buses in the morning are hitting the bus stops early, because then other things, inconveniences, problems, yes, but if a bus stop hits the stop early and misses people, you got kids that maybe they have no other way of getting to school, and that is a big problem. So that's something you need to hammer on Illinois Central really hard, because we can't have kids that are ready to come to school not able to, because some families, it's not like they can go back to the house and have their parent drive them in. In some cases, that's their only way.
Agreed.
So we need to hammer them on that.
Agreed.
Any other questions or comments regarding bus transportation? All right, that moves us to Summer Summit follow-up.
Wanted to provide a board with a follow-up to the Summer Summit, which occurred on June 23rd. Just for refreshing everybody's memory, on that day, the Summer Summit involved all of our feeder districts, so Benjamin 25, West Chicago 33, and Winfield 34, as well as SACID, our special education cooperative. They were invited to participate with us in an effort to really construct avenues for further collaboration and alignment and discussion. In that summit, there were 6 subgroups that came out of it to continue meeting throughout the year, and the subgroups were academics, special education services, technology, athletics and activities, human resources, and business services. And several of those subgroups have been meeting already, and thought it would be good to report out just what has happened with those subgroups. So Will and Dan and Julie have been fortunate enough to facilitate and lead those subgroups. So I'm going to have them each speak to just what has come out of their meetings.
You want to go ahead?
Sure, why not? You guys have heard enough from me so far. The principals of our 3 respective feeder middle schools, myself, have really taken a lot of this on ourselves, and then to work collaboratively with the folks on the administrative team here at WeGo. 34, there's not as much of an administrative team. It really is kind of a one-person show, but their new principal, Jason, seems up to the task. So we've met twice already, and really we've focused our efforts on the academic side of it around re-implementing the full PSAT 8 process. As you may remember, pre-COVID, we were down to an abbreviated PSAT 8 that was going to help with the placement process. During COVID, that obviously was incredibly difficult to do. We're going back to giving the full PSAT 8 and getting an even more robust examination of where kids are at so that we can frame our learning and our teaching appropriately. We're also really looking at the placement process to make sure that it's authentic, it's holistic, it's streamlined, so that it's very clear to everybody involved in it. So that's been another area of focus that we've taken on. We've also been able to take on SEL programming pretty extensively. The feeders have been very receptive and eager about our Student Support Initiative and Den Time and the SEL standards that we've utilized, the process, the structure. We gave them the 9th grade curriculum last week. They're looking at it. So we're really excited to look at them doing some things around that as well too, and then partnering however we can. They've also shared some really good ideas that they're doing around helping kids identify trusted adults and some things that we want to look to do similarly through our Den Time process as well. Also in the academic side of it, as the board may know, as a leadership team, as a school, we've really looked at our grading practices since the COVID pandemic, specifically looking at grading for equity and making sure that our grading practices are holistic and accurate and really reflect the needs of our students. We shared that text and some of those findings with our feeders, and we're going to continue that dialogue for them as well too. And finally, we have found that 3 of the 4 districts have Blue Point. And we also have a lot of similar needs around school safety. So school safety is going to be another area we continue our alignment on in from the principal perspective, as well as we have had some initial conversations about the vaping prevention and substance abuse identification that we have done as a school here as part of our parent engagement series. We've had some conversations about pushing that down and actually us hosting that for our feeder schools where they can bring their families here and we can do the same thing. So no dates, no specific shit, but they recognize, as we recognize, that for our kids who chronically vape and are very difficult to prevent them from doing it, that habit started before high school. So they want to partner with us so we can try to be as preventative as we can in that measure. And the last 2 I'll just really quickly talk about. We found some really good alignment in our AVID programs. Again, more alignment in those came out of the Summer Summit. That is with District 33, but also in working with our McKinney-Vento students. Sarah Norton at 33 has really worked with Mr. Egan to help us identify even more students and streamline even more supports to those kids. So it's been a really welcome area of alignment out of the Summer Summit.
Dan, you want to jump in?
You got called on, Dan.
Since May of last year, I've met with the business managers from District 25, District 34, District 33. I've expanded a little bit to District 93 and Carroll Stream. We've met twice to discuss some local topics such as purchasing, food service, transportation, among many other things. We have another meeting scheduled for October 20th. These meetings really have opened up some communication between our local neighbors, leading to a few emails back and forth with questions that I'm sure would not have happened otherwise. I think the other districts are appreciative of having that opportunity, as they're all brand new business managers, and so I can provide a little bit of questions and answers for them as they go through the process of doing something brand new for the first time. So we look forward to continue these meetings. It's been a good opportunity for everybody.
All right, and then I'll jump in with Human Resources. It has been a really positive experience bringing together folks from all these different districts. We sort of created our own local HR network, is kind of what we call it, and that group is really centered around finding ways to better serve our local community, understanding what our local needs look like, and what makes us different than other parts of DuPage or even Northern Illinois. So it's been really positive to have that group come together, not only to share ideas, but to improve our efficiencies, look at our processes, talk about changes that are coming up and expected, and then to collaborate on some projects that are going to help to move us all forward together to better serve those needs. The constants that I always see at every meeting, Julie Groen, the HR director with SACID, and Matt Rich, the superintendent with Winfield 34, have been at every meeting. So since the June summit, we meet once a month. So it's been July, August, September. We have another date on the calendar for October as well. Some of the conversation, and we have a shared agenda, some of that conversation is really centered around issues that are timely. So for example, in late summer, we're talking about our recruitment processes, especially for areas like paraprofessionals, onboarding, kind of thought partnership on ideas to improve that, talking about our substitute teacher orientations, what's successful, where we can improve, looking at our process for mandated trainings. as we got into the fall, talking more about processing some of the legal updates that are coming our way, and then looking at, staff wellness ideas, for example, and how it is we can best support the social emotional needs of our employees as we're trying to do the same for our students in these schools. A couple of projects I'm really excited about. Number one, we have been exploring as a team ways to expand our fingerprinting to make that more accessible. Right now, it's only available essentially 1 hour a week for each of our districts if we go through the West Chicago Police Department. So looking at opportunities to make that more accessible and therefore, improve that experience for our new hires. And looking at a job fair that would be hosted by SACID, but available to all the member districts, and that we as a local HR network could help to promote, plan, and find ways to, again, bring in people that are really going to be great for our district. So we're excited about that and looking forward to collaborating on more future projects as well.
And then lastly, the superintendent group has been meeting pretty regularly for quite a while, but one of the topics that came out of the summit was formalizing more our data sharing, information sharing. They're all of our kids, and anymore, the transition process starts much earlier because the support systems are so much more complex, and so the communication and the transition really involves having that kind of information. And I shared with the board that our attorney drafted a draft version of an IGA. I shared that with all the districts, and I've heard from District 34, and they're very much agreeable with it, as well as District 33. It doesn't have to be quite as formalized because they already have something in their handbooks that speak to sharing that kind of information because it's presumed that many of their kids will come to our school. And I know that Jim Wool at District 25 is going to be reviewing that with their board as well. But all seems really positive towards that, which really opened the door to provide information not just about the academic pieces, which is important, and that helps in the course selection. But anymore, we want to be able to transition those supports that were at the middle school to the high school, and that involves also communication with the parents too, to get them involved with that. So that data sharing formalization is really important and key, and that came out of that meeting from the summit. So that's really exciting, and we will continue to meet throughout the year. But I have to say that it's been really a pleasure being able to not just get back to in the sense of what normal school is, but the dialogue about normal school things with superintendents and colleagues to find ways to be able to move forward. So it really is much welcomed. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I want to just thank the four of you for the intention to follow through with this. I think it's super valuable. Transition to high school is overwhelming, so these steps have not gone unnoticed. I really thank all of you for all your time invested in this, and Dr. Chang for leading it. I do want also to speak on the McKinney-Vento piece. I think that's huge. Definitely being around, working in the community. I know that evictions are something that did not go away with COVID, so thank you so much for being intentional in that processes, because it's a tough one, and a lot of the demographic is definitely impacted by that, so thank you. One thing I did have a question about is I do know that out of our first dual collaboration, there were some questions that came from that. Were we able to answer those questions and get back, or is that still something that we're in the process of doing?
That's something that we're still processing through, how that collaboration group really is going to address those, because some of those questions really have to do with all of our districts and not just our relationship with 33. And so, as an example, the discussion obviously was really focused on school safety for the last several months, because the reality is all of our area districts, even last spring, if you recall, they were struggling with some serious weapons and gun issues. And so when we talk about engaging with the family and the community, it kind of took a back step from the formalized questions and to the bigger picture of what do our parents and our community need, and how can we collaborate with that. So as an example, when Will talked about the parent engagement series and opening that up, that seemed to address some of those topics without really just sticking to the formalized question of what it is. So it is in part trying to reflect back on what the what the changes have been that we're seeing with our students and with our families and our community, and coming up from that route.
So those questions will be answered at a later time?
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments regarding Summer Summit?
I just want to go on what Penny said, and just wanted to thank you for all of your collaboration efforts because like the transition to high school is huge, so just wanted to say thank you. Appreciate it.
It's good when the districts work together.
Well, and kudos to the other districts for really stepping up and being part of this as well. It takes a whole team to come together, and so we appreciate everybody chipping in.
Really appreciate the follow-up. Thank you very, very much. Yeah.
All right, that is the end of our agenda for open session. We will be going into executive session. There will be no action taken after executive session. At this point, the recommended motion is to adjourn to executive session for the purposes of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, as well as collective negotiating matters.
Second.
Roll call, please.